Hello, Alistair.
Hello, Cecilia. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Pretty good, thanks.
I see Eric is also on the call. Hello, Eric. And Hassan. Look, everybody's popping in. I've got a couple of people on mute. I've got people traveling. Hello, Hassan. Are you somewhere quieter than usual?
I'm hoping it's quieter. I don't know. You tell me if it's quieter.
Yeah, it's a little bit, but you're speaking up, so that helps.
Okay. I know I actually watched one of the videos the other day and I realized that I actually do need to speak up. I hadn't watched how it comes across on the other end. So.
No worries. So the call is being recorded, just so all of you know, and we're going to give everyone a couple of minutes to get put in and connected and all of that. Eric, do we get to see that epic mustache and beard of yours?
Well, I'll give you the reveal a little bit later, but my hair situation has changed a little bit.
All right. I'm excited. And
so
Alistair, how was your weekend?
Weekend here, I don't know. Good, pretty casual. It's a weird weather period, so we are, 40s and 70s and just kind of all over the place.
It was quite interesting while I was there. How about you, Hassan?
So we got snow yesterday.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it had actually, about a week ago, it had actually reached like the high 60s. So we were in the 50s and 60s, and then this weekend it jumped to about 15, 20 degrees.
That's wild. So, Alistair, where are you?
In Washington, D.C.
Ah, okay.
Where we had a warm day and then a couple of cold nights, and tomorrow, Tuesday, is supposed to be the peak time for the cherry blossoms here.
Yes.
So I'm hoping the cold spell didn't do any damage, but probably not.
Well, I've been seeing a lot of people post pictures of the cherry blossoms, so I envy you, and we'll keep good thoughts. I was going to ask you, if you're in DC, you're not too terribly far from Charlottesville. If you're available, we have some extra passes for the Tom Tom Festival, if you'd like to come down.
Yeah, when is that?
We have an entrepreneurial ecosystem builder track day on the 12th of April. So we have passes that'll work on the 11th, which is creative ecosystems, and then the 13th as well, which I think is food. So.
Yeah, let me make a note of those dates and I'll let you know. It's about maybe a 2-hour drive for me.
I'm happy to email you. Eric, did you decide whether or not you can join us?
Unfortunately, it looks, and I had the dates for that other conference wrong, so
okay.
So it looks like I can't do the bundle, unfortunately.
Oh, that's a shame. But when is your other meeting? Summit?
Let's see. Oh, I'm gonna have to look again. It's early May, so I think the first weekend in May or into the first weekend of May.
Great. I see Emma. Hi, Emma. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for joining us. And Norris, I see you're around as well. Hello. Are you in the great outdoors?
I am. It's a coffee shop, and their music is rather loud. And in honor of April 1st, it is the Bing Crosby Christmas channel.
Oh my gosh!
It's actually been quite lovely, but it's about 55 outside, so why not?
Okay. I'm glad you're joining us. Hi, Sam and Nicholas. I haven't met you yet. How are you?
That's true. Hello, Cecilia. Good. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for joining us. And where are you located?
Based in Durham with Forward Cities, so North Carolina troop.
So you work with our lovely friend Faye.
Exactly. So Faye was just in the room, has some sparse office time this week after traveling around everywhere.
Yes, we got to spend time with her in Portland, and we'll look forward to seeing her at the Tom Tom Festival. And I was just saying, and I'll repeat just so everyone knows, we have an opportunity to join with some people. The Tom Tom Festival people have been very nice in giving us an opportunity to join their festival. So I have some extra tickets, passes for the day, April 12th, definitely for the Ecosystem Builders track. So if anybody would like to come, let me know. You can email me at eshipgoals@gmail, and we'll have you join. So we've got quite a crew on here. What I'm going to invite everyone to do is to tell us your name, where you are, what organization you're with, if you're representing an organization, and the question for today will be, tell us, since you're all data geeks, and I got permission to call everyone a data geek, if you will tell us what fun data fact is something that you're known for, or some tidbit of information that people don't necessarily assume you might know. So my name is Cecilia. I am your ESHIP community activator, support staff, air traffic controller, and I'm here to help move things forward in these initiatives, particularly this call around Goal 5, which is about metrics and methods. And fun fact that people assume that I know, and I guess I can fill in, is if you'll see the pictures behind me, I'm a big Springsteen fan, so I can probably tell you where he was on what tour and some specific date, and I figure I can make that up and people are just going to assume it because I have all the swag behind me. So we're going to popcorn and ask you to pick the next person. I will ask Sam. Sam, tell us a little bit about you and what fun fact or data tidbit do you have in your pocket?
Hi. So my name's Sam Steidel, and I live in Roanoke, Virginia. I am a consultant primarily right now. I worked for 7 years in the community college system, mostly under innovation and entrepreneurial initiatives. But right now I'm working toward a doctorate in community college leadership. And my research emphasis is entrepreneurial leadership. So if you have an entrepreneurial leader, how does that trickle down into the community? I'm very interested in that. And regarding data, my interest is primarily more in the converting what is complicated to the rest of the world. You know, I like listening in with my quantitative friends, but then I think more naturally in terms of how do you communicate that to the rest of the world? That's what I really enjoy. So nice to be here with you guys.
Okay, Sam, go ahead and pick somebody else to introduce themselves.
Thanks for the reminder. All right, Andy, you're up.
Unmute. Hello, everyone. My name is Andy Stoll. I am representing the Kauffman Foundation today on this call. I'm not going to be on the whole call, just to give you a heads up, but I have a little bit of an update on some goal language that I'd like to propose and get some thoughts on and feedback. What data do I have? I don't actually have an answer for it. Data that I have. What's the question one more time? I need to stall.
What tidbit of information or data geek stuff do you have?
Oh, I got it. Okay, this does not have data, but one of my fascinations is different kinds of beverages. So I can name like national beverages for probably about 30 countries in the world, and specifically like how to make them because I figured it out when I was there. So I'll show you that parlor trick at the ESHIP Summit.
Great. If you'll call on somebody. Go ahead and call on somebody, Andy.
Hassan.
Did we just lose Hassan? You called on him and he disappeared. That was a neat trick.
He tried to mute himself and knocked himself off. I'm going to go with Nick. Nick calling in from Forward Cities.
Thank you, Andy. So my name is Nick Gunkel. I'm leading the research evaluation work of Forward Cities, which is a national nonprofit capacity building organization that is working to create more inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystems. A bit of data information. I was a long-time research associate during grad school, and someone was exploiting my German skills. I'm originally German, and I was transcribing information from old German city books. And you had like a list of events that happened in any remote town in Germany. And some of the most intriguing parts were about fires and plagues and how many people they killed. So probably there were over 10,000 data entries about plagues and fires of the Middle Ages in German towns that ran across my computer. I thought it's interesting tidbit from the economic historian background. I call on, who do I have? Emma. She's on the top.
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm based in Boulder, Colorado, and I'm representing Celebrate EDU. We are a nonprofit, and we have developed programs to support people with developmental disabilities and teach them about entrepreneurship and self-employment as a viable option. And something fun related to data, one of our programs is a workshop where students go through and create their own popcorn business, like a fake business, to learn a lot about starting a business and the kind of skills that go into that. So a data point that we collect is how many pounds of popcorn have been used in our kindling workshop. So that's kind of a fun random data point that I'm always collecting. I will call on Norris.
Oh, Norris. Never heard of him. No one's laughing. I'm still muted.
No, you're not muted. Go ahead, Norris.
Oh, okay. My computer is showing me as muted, and it seems to be getting it backwards all the time. Norris Kruger was the Idaho ecosystem builder and research scholar in entrepreneurship. So most of the people know that I have a research PhD in entrepreneurship, and I do a lot of data, everything from both qualitative and quantitative. I'm trying to think of a fun fact is that, for whatever it's worth, I have a good eye for figuring out who has the right stuff pretty quickly and who doesn't, which can be very delightful when you see someone surprisingly with the right stuff, and depressing when there's somebody who should have it but doesn't. It get a little annoying. But I'm known for I see the patterns in data that nobody else sees, which of course means I miss the data, the patterns that everyone else does. So that I'm really, this has been a very exciting project for me. But a little bit of interesting, here's a good bit of trivia. If you do time series analysis of business entries and business exits, it's about a 2-year gap, a 2-year lead time. But business exits actually are a leading indicator of business entries for complicated and interesting reasons. So looking at the data you get to Sam's point, that sometimes when you see what the data says isn't what it's really saying. So also, I talk too much, so I'm going to try Hassan again. Did we lose Hassan?
Sorry, I'm guessing that you tried me before. I actually lost my connection.
Oh, let's go to Hassan, because he's got the same microphone I do.
So Hassan Bazia in Detroit, wear a variety of different hats, most of them related to entrepreneurship, ecosystem building, and economic development. Data, I wouldn't call myself a data geek. I'm nowhere in the same league with
Speak up just a little bit, Hassan.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Sorry about that. I'm in I think I'm a lot of noise in the background. So I'm in Detroit, and I wouldn't call myself a data geek. I'm on the other calls, the old calls, and I like to stay on some of the other calls to stay connected, to connect all the pieces in my mind. As far as data, little known data, I think Cecilia and I are probably both music geeks. So data that I could probably reference is totally useless, I guess, on this call, but I can recall the chart positions, the Billboard chart positions of a lot of the hits over the last 34 years. And I will see who else has Reagan. I'll talk to Reagan.
Okay, Reagan, you're up.
Hi, y'all. So my name is Reagan. I'm a licensing officer at UCLA Technology Development Group, which is the tech transfer office at UCLA. Pretty much almost every university in the United States that does research, as well as other research institutions, such as like the Fred Hutchinson, have tech transfer offices where we are responsible for trying to work with our various community members, be it startups, be it entrepreneurs, be it angels, VCs, and as well as small, medium, and large companies to transition the technologies developed here at the universities or at the institutions to the marketplace, to the market, to the industry, in order for be more fully developed. You can imagine that the stuff that the faculty members and the researchers here figure out is kind of really early on and bleeding edge when it comes to technology. And so it needs some time to be baked. So my responsibility is in dealing with a lot of those technologies. And so I'm heavily involved in the startup community here at UCLA around Los Angeles. It's basically the best way to transition technologies out of the university into the industry, given the position of the technology. As from a data wonk kind of thing, I also have another entire hat that I wear that's dealing with a national organization of people that do my job. It's called AUTM, AUTM, and I manage their database and metrics and surveys from that group. I run the U.S. licensing survey plus 3 other surveys that we're trying to do. So this initiative that we have here in regards to the ESHIP goals and how to define ecosystem builders is really very, very key or very close to what we're trying to look at AUTM and as well as here at UCLA. Let's see who I would choose next. Sorry, I gotta scroll over here. I'll start. Yeah.
Okay, I have something in common with Reagan in that as a consultant, I spent most of my career setting up technology commercialization programs at universities, almost entirely outside the US, some in Western Europe, but mostly in Central and Eastern Europe, Ukraine, Russia, Kazakhstan, Vietnam, and about 12 or 13 others. And that includes setting up ecosystems to support innovation and commercialization, and particularly startups and small technology-based companies. On the data point, I can tell you anything you want to know about the Titanic and its sinking, and what I don't know, I will make up.
It's amazing.
So who's left? Eric?
Yes, hello. Let's see, might even be able to start that thing. Oh my heavens. Hi everyone, my name is Eric Renz-Whitmore. I'm with the City of Albuquerque. I work with our Technology and Innovation Group and also our Economic Development Department. Let's see, and I'm not sure if it answers the question, but the tidbit that I'll share is I I'm a really bad client and customer, but I end up working with a lot of people who do information and data visualization. One sort of a friend colleague is one of the founders of Etsy, who basically designed their first website. So how do you make information, I don't know, attractive, but also useful and help, hopefully, in a way that doesn't lie? So that's one reason why this field has always appealed to me. Thank you. I think that's everyone. I do see a number that popped up, but I don't know whose name that would be.
So whoever.
Eric, it's Meg from Minnesota.
Ah, Meg.
The 608 number. I
Yes.
seemingly am always driving between Minneapolis and St. Paul during these calls. So we are lucky enough here in Minneapolis and St. Paul to have two twin cities right next to one another, but it means a lot of drive time back and forth. So I work for our economic development partnership. So we cover 16 counties here in Minnesota. And the work I do specifically is to help manage a coalition of partners focused on entrepreneurship and innovation. So that work is sort of kindly titled Forge North. So a little piece of data we've been working with recently that I think is really interesting and a little bit unique. Our partners at Greater MSP work on an initiative called Make It MSP, specifically around talent attraction and retention. And so our Forge North team and our Make It MSP team have been working together to start to analyze LinkedIn data to look more specifically at where are people actually migrating to and from and for what type of jobs, and being able to see that level of detail in data versus the data we've typically looked at, that's, you know, state data on jobs that's lagging by 2 years, has been a really great experience for all of us to be making better database decisions in our work.
That's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing. Well, thanks everybody for being on the call. I'm going to share with you in the chat, and I'll follow up either on Slack and or the email address, the current dashboard that Christine, my colleague, helped create. It has just a bunch of information, including the schedule of the calls, the people that are involved, the goals, and there's an updated goal initiative, which I'll share. And then I'm going to have Andy talk about the current goal initiatives. If you can see my screen, have just a brief sampling of some of the initiatives that have been brought forth. There's been over 130 initiatives under these 7 goals, and you'll see under goal 5, although we started out with a little bit more, there are 3 top initiatives that we're focused on, and I'm going to have Andy talk about those. So turn it over to you, Andy.
Yes, hello everyone. For those of you who haven't met, I just want to say hello and thank you for joining in this this working group and this growing community of people who care about ecosystem building, and in this particular case, the metrics and methods revolving around it. For those of you who are unaware, before I get too far into the specifics on Goal 5, I just want, because I'm also going to have to duck off the end of this call, which is please know that the registration opened last week for the 2019 ESHIP Summit. I think you're all aware, because you're on this call, what that is, but in case there's somebody new, the ESHIP Summit is really targeted at early adopters of entrepreneurial ecosystem building. That's you, who want to help build the field. We're in our 3rd year, moving through a process that we call Discover, Design, Deliver. Discover the needs, that are these 7 goals. And then we're in the middle of the design process. What are we going to try to design for our solutions? And then the 3rd year, and probably many years beyond, will be how do we deliver on those goals? And so if you're available May 21st through 23rd, please join us in Kansas City. I hope to see you all there. Registration is open at, maybe so you can put that in the chat, but it's eshipsummit2019.kaufman.org. There are still plenty of seats available, but if you call me in a month and say I didn't get in and there's no more seats, can you please get me in? I'm going to say I told you a month ago to sign up, because it will sell out if any past events were an indication. And for those of you who may have concerns about how you're going to be able to pay to get there, we do have scholarships still available, and those are on a first come, first served basis. There's some criteria, and if you qualify for that, please do encourage you to apply, both scholarships for registration and also for your travel if you qualify. So please join us. This is meant to be a community-led effort to build this field, and Kaufman is really serving as what I call sort of the convener and the keeper of the objectives. in the nature of being the keeper of the objectives, if we take a look at this ongoing dashboard that Cecilia has brought forth to us, and the link in the chat. Oops, hold on. Now I've lost it. There it is. And you'll notice right at the top it says everything's a draft, so we'll just continue that theme. We have been through a cycle of feedback with the community members, with the Kauffman Foundation, with what we call national resource providers. A number of you are on this call, folks representing Autumn and Forward Cities, to try to just get us closer to what we're going to be able to deliver in our deliver years. And I just wanted to give you an update on goal number 5. There has been a little bit of tweaking that has happened, particularly with 5.1, and I just want to share it with you to see. This is sort of what I and we, the Kauffman Foundation, are sort of sharing back as a revision based on the last set of things that had come forth from many of you on this call. And I just want to get your thoughts really quick. So remember the goal number 5 is really saying we need to define the methods and metrics for ecosystem building. And that right now, lots of people building ecosystems, mostly happening in custom and bespoke ways. There's no real consensus around what's the process on how to do that. You have really smart people like Alistair who've written books on it. You have folks like Nick and the folks at Forward Cities who are hard, so inventing a model. But everyone's still sort of working in their own corners. But there is no real consensus on what's the process to build an ecosystem and how do we measure an ecosystem's health. We know how to measure things like, company starts and investments, but we don't know how to measure things like trust and really connectivity in the way that people want to measure it. So this goal really says, in order to have a field, we've got to get to these 7 goals. Goal number 5 is really around, again, the methods and metrics. Sorry if this is repetitive for some of you, many of you, but I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So then our initiatives are really saying, what are some tangible and tactical things we can do within the next year or 2 or 3 years to be able to deliver on this goal? This is not all the things. This is just the things that have boiled to the top thanks to work by many of you. Folks like Eric and Hassan and Norris and some other folks on this call who've been involved in helping form some of these. Just want to shout those folks out too. So let's talk about this now. So the last version that we had, which was like version 27,409, metric 5 or initiative 5.1. I'm just going to read it because this is the old. I'll just read you the old language. It was 5.1, a common set of practical metrics. So identify, develop, and communicate a shared common set of metrics that can be useful to measure an ecosystem. And so we cycled this back around with a bunch of folks, including our research team here at the Kauffman Foundation. And the feedback we got was that doesn't feel like it's an initiative. It feels like it's the end goal. So meaning that you can't have, like, one person isn't going to go in the corner and come back with a final answer. It's going to be all of you and all those people that are interested in building this collectively as a community. What is something we could do now that is immediately needed now that would get us closer to that? Because actually goal number 5 is really what was the equivalent of what 5.1 was, which is we need some metrics and we need a process. So this language really gets at this notion that right now there isn't really a clear community of practice around people who are thinking about metrics. And so if we were to deliver something tangible, a project, a program, the thinking here is that a community of practice, and it's purposely vaguely called a community of practice because I don't know I don't know exactly what form that would take, and it would be really up for the group that really wants to do it or the national resource provider that wants to support it to really shape that. But that's the language with 5.1. So really looking at saying the first step to get us to final metrics would be starting with a community of practice, and perhaps this group of people on this call is the beginning of that community of practice. So that's 5.1. 5.2 is just a little bit of language changing, but not massively different than what was said before. And this is really looking at a repository of ecosystem building practice. So as I mentioned, Alistair has an approach that he's pioneered and actually written up in a pretty fascinating book that he's working on. Forward Cities folks have their approach. I'm sure you all, especially those of you doing the ecosystem building work, have your approach. We don't even have a place you can go to find those. So let's just start with, can we get those together? And then 5.3 is really around, it's pretty straightforward. There is, as far as I know, only been one conference on ecosystem building research that was national or global, and Norris can probably tell us more about that. But there's an ongoing regular conference. So these are really the 3 that get called out. There was a 5.4 that was initially prioritized. I think we can put it in there. I know, Norris, you've done some work on it. The idea was originally yours, and I added it, which is 5.4 was originally just a way to survey a large number of ecosystem builders. It's not to say we're not going to do it. Our research team was a little unclear exactly what that was for and what it would mean, and we're confused by it. And so what I think that simply means is it doesn't, we can't do it. It's not a list. It's just, there's some, I would say I want to get to a little bit more clarity about what that means so that we don't confuse other folks outside of that. Again, it's not to say we're not going to do it. Just want to come back with these 3 ones that I think I'm fairly confident, the Kauffman Foundation is confident in saying these feel strong, tactical, doable, real things that we could tangibly move forward with a team of people within the next, 6 to 12 months. I'll stop there. Open feedback. Everything's a draft. You can give us feedback directly now. We can take a couple minutes, or to see if we need to move on, we can certainly take feedback in other ways.
Andy.
Norris, you're breaking up.
I heard my name and then you cut out.
Yeah, I actually unplugged the microphone. Sorry. Okay. Not good. I wish I'd known you were doing this before. I spent a lot of time last week talking to people and rewriting drafts and briefs. I don't disagree with the concept. I am disappointed about this doing a survey because we need to have some information to share with the ESHIP delegates when we get there. And I've talked to enough research people to be fairly, it does need some work, but maybe that's an offline conversation. The community of practicing is nice. One of the things that I've been reaching out to the various academic and policymaking organizations, and we're getting a lot of very positive feedback. There's nearly a dozen good scholars who are very interested in helping with this, ranging from someone who is a Kauffman grantee under the unusual, the UMM research challenge, all the way to a chair professor at Harvard who does studies on gender and investing. So we've got a lot of horsepower behind that. So anyway, I feel like I may have wasted some effort in the last week, but everything's a draft.
Sure. So let me just address that real quick. So remember what these are. Remember, these are targets. Like, these aren't the only things we're doing the absolute cleanest way. It's what are the things that we need to deliver as a community to get us closer to the top line goal 5, which says we need a process and we need some metrics. Some of the feedback we got, not just from the Kauffman research team, but a couple other teams, was like, no one is going to be able to deliver a process and a set of metrics within the next 12 to 24 months that is the definitive answer to these questions. And so what is the next step? Let's identify those targets. And that's really how I think we're basically pulling 5.1 back to be more tactical and practical in terms of a time limit. Not to say that anything else that you developed isn't worthy of the next step. And also knowing that there's a 5.4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and other things that we're very open to, but what are we identifying as the top priorities within goal number 5 is really the notion here. So happy to talk to you off. It sounds like we should talk offline about the other piece, the survey piece that you were thinking for the summit. But I don't want to nullify anybody's work. I don't think that's what I'm trying to say here. What I'm saying is, like, we're just trying to define the targets that are more deliverable than the last written version of this.
Well, I thank you, Eddie.
It's like step one.
That I don't think anyone expected to have anything final, but my impression from the discussion going forward that we'd like to have something, a very, very rough draft of what would the metrics repository look like, what would the process, what it could look like, to have something for the ESHIP delegates to take sledgehammers to. But again, we can want to have something. So anyway, take a look at the deliverables thing I posted, and
Sure.
we can talk later.
Cool.
And I will shut up.
Cool. No, I think we're good. We just need to just make sure I understand what you're working on, and I mean that's partially the part of the goal. The reason for the goals is so we know what everybody else is working on, because it's basically, can we align behind this set and sort of collectively agree that these are the things we need to get to? And again, 5.1 is simply saying here's probably what was there before said here's the next 7 steps or 10 steps. This is saying like literally the first step is a community of practice around people who care about metrics of ecosystems. Thank you, Norris. Other folks, thoughts, comments? Cecilia, you tell us that you keep time on us for us.
Sure. I do want to just point out that that because of the rework, that some of these numbers have been shifted. So what was prior as 5.1 isn't necessarily 5.1. I think it's they've shifted numbers.
Okay.
So just so you know, the repository of practices and case studies is still now 5.2. So it hasn't gone away. It's just been reordered. So I just want to make sure that's out there.
Okay, and we'll double check that. This is partially, this thing is a draft, that this is like cycle number 5 with this set. So we need to probably make sure the numbers are right. They've moved a bit.
Absolutely. And there's a question that I want to ask all of you, but go ahead, Sam. It looks like you wanted to chime in, so I'm going to let you have space.
Yeah, I just had a question. In terms of the repository of ecosystem building practices and case studies, what I'm wondering is there, are we looking to collect those within a certain framework or just collect articles? Or collect?
I don't know if I have the answer to that question, but I can tell you my opinion.
Sure.
I think that, I mean, at this point, I mean, just my honest opinion, just like, it just is like, I don't think there's even a half-assed collection anywhere of like, what are people's models for thinking about this, right? Like people refer to about 3 books. They all refer to the same 3 books. And those are, the only reason there's consensus is because there's only 3 books. But there are dozens of models out there. And if you asked, I bet you asked most people on this call, you said, here's a pen, here's a whiteboard. Can you show me how you think about ecosystem building? You'd get 12 different drawings. And so I think this means, let's just start with the basic, like, I mean, even if you, I mean, whether you're setting metrics or the process to build ecosystems, I don't even know, like, I don't even have a baseline. I mean, folks maybe like Nick or Alistair who've been thinking a lot about metrics. I don't know if there's like even a framework, or Norris, is there an agreed upon framework to think about this metric stuff that people use at all? Or, I mean, there's maybe academic frameworks, but those create issues when they run into practitioner frameworks that maybe aren't as rigorous as academic. Yeah. So I don't actually know the answer to that question.
That's exactly why I asked you the question. I was like, if you don't know, then good. I'm in a good place because
we have 2 or 3 of the brightest minds in the world right now on this stuff on this call. So I would turn to them to say, is there a framework already?
Well, I like Alistair's framework because it's very similar to, very independently, it looks a lot like Startup Genome's framework. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy studying ecosystems for his PhD thesis, and he developed an ecosystem maturity model that looks remarkably like Startup Genome, but did it completely came to it completely independently. So there is starting to be some convergence, and the one sort of factoid is every community wants to be either an A or a D, because they can get that, whichever will get them more money to put into it. But what the stakeholders want is really important. And I think Alistair reminded me of that. Different stakeholders, different metrics.
Yeah, I could jump in. I think agree with what Norris is saying. The really important thing from just my point of view is you have to have some kind of a model before you can really think about metrics, because you have a model. From the model, you know how to take measurements. When you take measurements, then you can create metrics. And I think sometimes there's a waste of effort in trying to do that backwards, trying to start with what are metrics before you really thought too much about the measurements. And then you cannot really come up with good measurements until you figured the model.
What's the model?
As Norris said, a lot of these models are very similar. They may be displayed differently, but at the root they're very similar, and similarity really is all these models are essentially building blocks of some kind connected to each other. So it's very much like the network. We have nodes and links.
So it's not necessarily a matter of which framework is accurate, but really what's your desired outcome and which model might fit that outcome and which metrics you need to fit within that model.
I think that's a good description. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really helpful. Thanks, you guys.
But with just one caveat, any model has to be tested. I mean, I think Andy said hundreds of models, but whatever the model is, it's got to be tested, and you have to collect data to do that, which frequently will come out as, for example, through questionnaires, through surveys of one kind or another, particularly face-to-face, which is always the most, gives you the most information. So we cannot just say, okay, we've got a model, now we're going to use it. It has to be tested, and if it doesn't look right, you have to reject it.
Yeah. And then that's where, like, you have that, and then Nick, I know you're on the call. That's what Forward Cities does. So Forward Cities has a model, and you guys are kind of in the. I mean, you've been iteratively doing it, working with some of us at the foundation. But I mean, Nick, do you have any thoughts on? Is there a framework that you commonly use, or are you guys pretty much building your own too?
Probably building our own is the best description. And going back to the conversation, what's the purpose of any findings coming out of this? And in our case, it's actually to improve the ecosystem through capacity building work. So looking through the lens of how can we diagnose where this specific neighborhood-based, if not city-based ecosystem stands, and how does it figure as part of a larger ecosystem in the city, and what kind of immediate action steps seem to arise out of this diagnostic, and who's actually driving this the diagnosis stage. Is it the community? Is it someone from external? So I think lots of variables, starting with the end goal, which in our case is actually to make suggestions and implement suggestions to strengthen whatever we found as lacking or should be improved or can be further refined. And then it's about who is executing it and through which mechanism.
Cecilia, if I could just a quick comment. Somebody today, I think it was Eric, it may have been you, mentioned on the Slack conversation that everything changes in time and we have to measure frequently not absolute numbers, but changes in the metrics. And I think to Samantha's point, that's a critical thing, because whatever model you have is going to change in time, and therefore whatever metrics you have are going to change in time. And that's not a bad thing, because so often it's much more important to measure how an ecosystem has changed, improved or not, over time than just one static measurement and model.
I love that. Thank you for bringing that up. I think, as we move forward, remembering that all of these things do shift, and I'm glad that you're all on the call to talk about it. One of the things that did shift is that we're creating a simpler brief. The initiative brief initially was a little overwhelming for some, so I included it in the email that I sent out. I just threw it in the Slack channel. We've created a little simpler proposition for people to look at. So imagine that you come to the ESHIP Summit maybe for the first time, and in the program guide you want to catch up on what's going on. This will be the translation of these initiatives. Instead of printing out an 8-page document to give people an overview of what these initiatives are about, we're going to try to put it in this form. Hassan is going to start test driving it on one of our initiatives, and then we'll start converting some of the existing initiative briefs that are much longer into the simplified form so that we can deliver it at the ESHIP Summit it for people to look at, including the national resource providers, which we're hoping are going to put some efforts behind these initiatives. So I just wanted you to be able to take a look at it and give us some feedback on what you're seeing and how that translates. And just think about it from a first-time viewer's point of view, because we are going to have people that are coming to the ESHIP Summit for the very first time and are not as familiar. So we want to put it in the most concise form so that it can be presented so that you can have robust conversations and work around those goals. So just to put that in there before we're checked on time. You know, the interesting thing about the survey that I wanted to bring up, the survey initiative, I had a conversation with a friend of mine at GoDaddy who does analytics, and he said, while it's important to measure in surveys and have people respond back, one of the things is that sometimes their responses don't equate to their actions. So he had thrown out there, and I just want to put it out there for some feedback, is perhaps it's more of a game or a set of conditional responses. So maybe it's not a survey of questions, but more of scenarios. And that's a different way to look at it. So I'm curious to hear what Reagan and Alistair and some of you who are doing this work on a regular basis think about that method of finding out people's responses.
Well, I'll jump in. I've done some scenario research, and you're gathering different things than you are from the survey. You're getting smaller but richer, deeper insights into a given situation, and if done right, can be very powerful. What is it? It still comes down. What is it that we're trying to find out? If we're trying to find out what are your go-to metrics in your community, that's a pretty straightforward question. If you're asking about what are you going to do about it, how are you going to use those metrics, that's very much where a scenario can come in handy. But we're still kind of at ground zero with all of this, so maybe there's a mix there. But scenario analysis, submitting the scenarios to people is it takes a lot of the respondents' time, and it takes a lot of time to carefully analyze. But there are powerful statistical tools for doing content analysis, for instance, that we can bring to bear. But we need data, period.
Yeah, I think I'd like to think for a while this week about scenarios. That's a very interesting suggestion. I've used some scenarios with people in the past, and Norris is right, it does take a lot of preparation and a lot of people's time. But, sometimes you can identify perhaps through an initial questionnaire. And again, telephone face-to-face is much better than just filling out a form. But you can identify maybe some opportunities to present scenarios to people and then to be able to discuss those, get people's reaction to them. As you know, it's a, I guess Shell Corporation in 1960s maybe came up with the idea of scenarios, and it's a very interesting suggestion. I like to think about that.
Another thing to think about with scenarios, you can do contrasting scenarios that have people in different situations that may not seem very different, but you'll get very different reactions. To. That there's a lot of good experimental research out there that I just realized might be relevant here. But it's a lot to prepare for, and you're going to have to pretest and pretest and pretest. But we might have a great opportunity in May to do a little of this pretesting, perhaps. we'll send Alistair and Eric to go torture them. I mean, interview them. Okay, Sam will help torture them too.
Okay. Amen. So I just have a question. I'm still relatively new to this conversation, so forgive me if you've already explored this, but have we thought about the whole teaching a guy to fish route and maybe teaching problem solving, societal problem solving through design thinking and the power of that, as opposed to, or in addition to this one sheet? Do you see what I mean? So we're talking about what's the problem, but what if what we think is the problem is not necessarily the problem, or has that been already vetted?
Well, at one point I thought there was going to be a goal 8 about entrepreneurship, education, and training, but I may have hallucinated that.
Yeah, because I kind of see entrepreneurship education, I think, threads through all of these. Yes. Because, entrepreneurship education and ecosystem building education can be delivered through online classes, and so can design thinking, which is somewhat done, but not from an ecosystem perspective as much. I'm not sure the people that know ecosystems automatically know design thinking. Some do.
I would say probably less than would be ideal, but we do have some evidence that you need to build human capital at the same time you're building social capital, and we're kind of focused heavily on the social capital side of it. There's definitely at least at national level data, there's quite a synergistic effect that's out there, but that's national level data that may be that can often be very misleading. But there is so much we have learned even in the last couple of years about what's best practice in entrepreneurial learning. Yes. That most places aren't doing. In fact, we had a discussion on the Academy of Management Entrepreneurship Division listserv, and someone asked, and we had a discussion that basically, if you have a chance to do experiential learning and you give lectures instead, you should be fired. I voted for hanged, but anyway, I got torn a new one by all the people who said, if I do experiential learning instead of lectures, I'll get fired. Like, what? But the truth is that we've not learned a lot about that. Maybe there's a place to plug that in. I'd love to talk with you offline about that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think we have a really powerful opportunity across just personal. I mean, I am completely biased. I get that. But I think that entrepreneurship education, we have an opportunity to educate within our circles, which is not always every ecosystem builder isn't automatically in education. You know what I mean? So there is a place for that. I just don't know exactly where that would live or how the rest of the groups would feel about that. I do think it could be powerful.
So Sam, to your point about the about education being infused in all of these goals, there definitely is, and we've also found that nested in all of these and permeating through all of these goals is storytelling. So we've had a separate focus working group call for storytelling, because in this particular goal, case studies are a perfect way of storytelling. In goal number 6, which is universal support, we talk about PSAs, which is another method of telling a story. So as we've identified some of that, we're very happy to host additional calls. I just want to make sure that in hosting additional calls, it helps to unify overlapping views, kind of a cross-cut, as opposed to breaking them up into smaller silos. So it's a big balancing game between giving everybody the added conversation, so we all come together to talk about these things. Having several of you on more than one call definitely helps, because now you get to see the overlap, as opposed to those of us like Christine and I, or Enoch or Andy, who are looking at it from this broad view. And so you're getting to see a little bit broader view, and not just in particular this initiative, right? So it's all a work in progress, and we're learning together. I really want to be mindful of time and make sure that we get out some of the conversations. So what I'd really like to make sure we do before I wrap it up and have you be able to chime in a little bit more. So I'm going to invite all of you to, when it's in particular conversations around metrics and methods, if we could keep that on the Slack channel. When I email everybody this time, I will make sure that you have each other's email addresses, so that if you wanted to have conversations offline, you're absolutely welcome to do so. I don't like to give out email addresses prior to you having some kind of engagement. I think that's a little creepy, to give everyone access to your emails and you have no idea who these people are. So now that you've at least put some voice to a name, then feel free to go around and communicate. The Slack channels are really good for having those deeper conversations. If we keep it to the Goal 5 Slack, then all of you who get really geeked out on this particular subject will not drown out, because I know that there's a tendency for people to take over conversations, and I'd really like to keep that general channel for widespread information. By all means, utilize it and feel free to share more information. It's just a matter of trying to balance the conversations just a little bit, because everybody wants to have them. So I don't want to cut anyone off or shift things, but then you lose it in that channel if you're all responding and then somebody changes the subject and then you lose track of what was being said before. So that there's that. If you need to contact myself or Christine, my colleague who's focusing on national resource providers, our joint email address is eshipgoals@gmail.com. We do have separate email addresses as well. And let's see, in a follow-up email, I'll make sure you have the link for the ESHIP Summit. So we hope to see everyone there. And then we have a couple of minutes, so if you want to share your thoughts again, I just wanted to make sure that we had all that information out before we wrap up. So I feel like, I don't know, I've cut off somebody who wanted to share something, so I'm just going to open it up and let others talk. Oh, go ahead, Nora.
Hearing nothing.
You guys are, I've just been very impressed. Alistair and Adam Rentschler, who's not on this call, and Samantha Nicholas's comments, and Eric's comments mostly on the Slack channel, I think, that it's just been remarkable how strong the energy of let's move forward on this. So I'm proud to be working with you guys.
Maybe a quick response to Samantha, that it should be possible, if you have good survey methods, whatever they may be, that you can build in problem-solving methodologies into those. So you can collect information, collect data, and at the same time bring out problems that people may have, and then shift that to problem-solving methods. And scenarios are also very good to introduce problem-solving techniques. I'm not a big fan of design thinking myself, but that's a possibility. And there are other problem-solving methods. But anything that helps the individual who's involved in ecosystem building, think more for themselves, do more for themselves, then that has to be a value.
Thank you for that perspective. I was waiting for a little bit of that. I was just waiting.
I can deliver more anytime.
I'm not sure if it's to that point. This is Eric. Let's see. But I think one of the values we get out of at least starting to do some surveys is we're trying to build up this relationship and this engagement with the wider community. And we kind of need to start having something that has that feedback loop so that they get into the habit of actually responding to surveys. Now that means that we have to establish some trust that, the questions are meaningful, that something happens with them. So I think kind of that process, that's something that I really do, to Norris and Alistair and other folks' point, that I do think we need to start sooner rather than later. But it's almost, for me, it's almost the value of starting to get people to answer questions almost as much as the data that it creates initially.
So one of the ideas that I was tooling around with to think about how we get people to respond, thought about maybe collecting some of the questions that you have and putting together maybe a monthly survey that had some of several people's questions. So we mix it up a little bit. Of course, that also has an incentive for you to answer those survey questions that are put forth by other people because you've got skin in the game. So perhaps that's something that we can share on either the Slack channel or on the Facebook page, which has more people that aren't really totally involved, as you all are. So the other thing I wanted to mention before I forget is that as we record these calls, they'll be uploaded to that dashboard I shared a link with. So there is a tab for those past calls that you can go back and look at or listen to. The other thing is the emails that get sent out that are around these goal works is also in that tab as well. So I think that's about it. So we're just about done on time. If you could give me one word to close out the call, that would be great. And let's start with you, Norris. Give us one word.
Not good at one word. Content. That's a terrible word. that is probably not even true. I want to say cautiously excited, but that's 2 words. Can I hyphenate that?
No, that's wonderful. Go ahead and call on somebody else.
Oh, Eric. Since he went last the last time.
Excelsior! That's good Stanley shout out, Samantha. Let's go.
Alrighty, I'm going to go with fascinating. I love this conversation. Nick.
Energy. Hassan.
So I still can't get used to looking at Eric without his mustache, so I'm just going to say renewal. And let's see. Reagan?
Sure. I would just go with draft because everything's a draft. How about Alistair?
Let me practice my American accent on this one and say progress, or as I would default to, progress.
That's fabulous. And I am very grateful to all of you. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to seeing you all at the ESHIP Summit. We'll follow up and send out everyone's emails, and we'll be in touch. So have a great week. Take care.